Coming to you from the far future. It's the Little Podcast of Horrors with James, Christina, and Chris.
Let's do it.
That's how the
Hello,
episode
friends.
starts.
Why, hello there.
Hello.
How's it going? Are we having fun yet? Well, we're about to.
So what are we drinking?
Your mom.
Wow.
I'll admit, I froze up. And I just that's what you always say. I'm having water.
I'm having bourbon with ginger beer and lime. So like a Moscow Mule, except bourbon instead of vodka.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm having a beer called Devour it's one of my new favorites from a local brewery right here in town, Three Nations, that I took you guys to when you were down for the Gutman's Bridge episode.
Yes. What did we have, Christina, while we were there? It was the
Orange creamsicle.
That was good.
It was
I like that
really
one.
good. Yes.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So Devour that I'm having now is it's a Mexican chocolate stout. It is my jam.
Sounds
Your
good.
jam.
So we ready for a story, guys?
Oh, I'm ready for a story.
Wait, we're going to be telling stories?
Entertain me.
Are you not entertained?
Not yet.
I would imagine that is why our listeners are here. They're just sort of like, okay, can you get to the story now? Are you ready to be creeped out? Turn the lights down low. Here we go.
So who likes time travel?
I love time travel.
Time travel.
Chris doesn't like time travel.
Time travel makes me sick. No, I'm kidding. They're making that
Every
joke,
time
kids.
he time travels, he just pukes as soon as he comes back.
It does. They're making that jokes. They're making that joke, listeners, because I guess
he likes time travel.
Some might say I'm obsessed. I like to say that I'm passionate.
Obsessed.
Okay, or I'm obsessed a little bit. So, yeah.
Well, today is going to be a little different from my usual shtick because I'm sharing with y'all my personal favorite unsolved mystery. It's going to be a little tale from the 1980s.
Okay.
And what I like about this one is that if this story turns out one day to be proven as a hoax, the kind of crazy work involved to make it a hoax would be about as unbelievable as the story being real itself. So like no matter how you cut this one, it's an impressive, fascinating story.
It's incredible, no matter what.
It's a hoax. It's a hell of an impressive hoax.
Yeah.
It's gonna deliver regardless.
What was funny is that James had the audacity to, I think, ask me if I knew about this story. You know, the one who's obsessed with time travel. Although I don't probably know even remotely as much as James knows about this story now, because you really dived in.
Well, it's one of my all-time favorites. It's got creepy, it's got sci-fi, it's got British people, just all the good stuff.
Wow, he just threw that in there. It's got creepiness, darkness, and British people.
And retro tech, which I'm all about.
Retro tech.
So, and the other thing I like about the story is the main person from whom this story comes, the person who reports the experience. It's in fact, it's his book that I'm going to be citing, but he doesn't try to sell this story to convince you of anything. Like, he's not even sure like what caused what he experienced. Like he's pretty open-minded by what could have happened himself, but like the only thing he's certain of is he has no idea what happened. So that to me adds some credence to me, because he's not hell-bent on selling me a particular narrative. It's left open for you to try to decide on your own as you read the story. Okay, so we're talking about, for those of you who've heard about it before, the infamous Dodleston messages.
Yes.
So to start off, I want to share a quote. So this is a quote of a quote. Ken Webb, who's going to be our central figure in the story, In his book, he shares a quote that kind of encapsulates his standpoint from this experience, and I feel like it's a good summation of the whole thing. So the quote is, in all these matters, I am acutely conscious of the inadequacy of my own knowledge, but I share the opinion and optimism of Sir William Crookes, who, when asked to explain how the psychic D.D. Home managed his feats, retorted, I didn't say it was possible. I said it happened.
Nice.
So as far as sources go, for this time around, I only have one source, and the source is Ken Webster himself. In 1989, Ken published a book, and I'll show it on camera for any viewers out there as opposed to just listeners. Ken's book was published entitled The Vertical Plane. It was originally published in 1989, and it's Ken's firsthand retelling of his experiences, which forget the exact time frame, but it's a good year or two worth of experiences. There's a lot that goes on. And so the first edition was published in 1989, and it's actually all but impossible to get your hands on the first edition, as in like on the secondhand market, it goes for like several $100s typically. Thankfully, within the past several years, he finally had a second, somewhat updated edition rather, published. So that's what I've got on hand is the second edition. So, and then like one other thing to note. So I'm not going to tell you everything in the book, right? Because I get the book. Ken put a lot of work into it. Throw him some change and get the book. So I'll be leaving some stuff out, obviously, but I will be telling you kind of like the main crux of the story, and hopefully get your interest in checking out the book because it's a good read. That said, I did find, and you'll see this kind of evident in some of the details that I share throughout this. Ken is not an author, and I don't say this to throw any shade on Ken. It's just like he's not an author by career. So as a result, I personally found the book a little bit harder to follow than most, but Ken gave it his best college try, and most of it is very coherent. There's just some spots where I found it a little hard to follow. Okay, so all that out of the way, let's get started with the story. So the time is 19. What's this herpaderp look coming out of Christina? Herpaderp.
Regale us. We are so ready.
We should take a screenshot of that. And...
I will. I can. This is all recorded, so
Okay,
So
sorry,
the time,
James.
So the time is 1984. And the central characters of our story here are Ken Webster, the author of the book, Ken's girlfriend, Debbie, 10 years his younger, and their female friend, Nick Beggerly, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So Ken, Debbie, and Nick lived in this small village called Dodleston. So Dodleston is basically within Cheshire, England. So Ken at the time, in 84, was an economics teacher at the nearby local Hawarden High School. And we can share this on our socials. I'm showing you all in our Discord, kind of one of the images I'm sharing is a map, just kind of give you an idea of what the area looks like from aerial view. So while they were living in Dodleston at the time, they were renovating an old cottage named Meadow Cottage. They had just acquired this cabin, and it was basically near Chester, and Chester was basically a cathedral city. Their friend Nick stayed upstairs in the what was basically a studio room, while the couple, Ken and Debbie, had the upstairs bedroom. So all their sleeping, living, all their dwelling areas upstairs, living room. Mm-hmm. Living area being downstairs. That being important because at night they're all upstairs. That'll be important later. So things start going afoot, if you will, around August, September 1984, when their friend roommate Nick finds footprints between the bathroom and the kitchen going up the wall.
Light Like muddy
wait,
footprints or like
yeah,
I
really.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know the texture of the footprints, like if it was trailing mud or what. I just know that there were footprints of a kind.
How big were they?
I don't know the size, but the important detail here is that when they stopped to look closer at the prints had an extra sixth toe.
what type of shoes were they?
Oh,
Well, given that they were toes, I'm not thinking they were shoes.
barefoot.
They're barefoot and they've got a sixth toe.
Yeah. So they immediately excused it. They just figured somebody was fooling around and had, again, they were in the middle of renovating this cabin. So they figured somebody was fooling around and, when they weren't in the cabin, when they were away, someone's fooling around and, painted some footprints or faked some footprints on the wall. Like, haha, very funny. So they painted over the footprints. The next morning, they find new six-toed footprints.
Okie dokie.
Bruh, it's a lot of work.
Right? So the second round kind of freaks them out a little bit. So they painted over them again. And from that point forward, they were creeped out. So they're too scared to go downstairs at night from that point on. They just like, nighttime, we're staying upstairs in our cozy bedrooms. Screw the first floor. We don't want to know.
The Fae are just having a field day in their first floor.
Right? Well,
Get out of here, Spider-Man.
2 days later, downstairs in the kitchen, they find cans of cat food stacked in a pyramid in the morning when they come down.
They got Fae living up in there, coming in and out.
And the next night, they find another stacking, just neatly stacked cans of cat food. So far, they've, mind you, okay, they've been creeped out, fair, but overall, they think the footprints and the stacks are just some prank. Reason being, this is a newly acquired old cabin. It's not particularly secure. It wouldn't take that much effort to sneak in at night. It wouldn't exactly require a bunch of ninjas to get in. Just it's accessible.
Sure.
So they're not too freaked out, just enough that they don't want to come down at night. But then 2 more nights pass, and they find a single 4-foot column of 2-liter lemonade bottles, a cat food packet, and a kitchen roll, just all in a neat stack, standing straight up. So whoever was doing the stacking was a really good stacker of random stuff. So now they're growing a bit uneasy, as you might.
Yeah.
No human being would stack stuff like this.
Right?
Even scarier, a human being came in and stacked stuff. Scarier.
It was such exact neatness that it stays standing all night.
Scary.
So at this point, okay, they're getting uncomfortable. And so they do start checking from that point forward, doing checks to make sure that the cabin is secure when they go to bed. Like everything's locked down, nobody can get in. So there's just kind of some small things that happen here and there from this point. At one point, Deb and Ken wake one night because they thought someone was in the room. They just thought there was a presence, and they wake up like no one's there. So anyway, things go back to normal. And Nick, the roommate, quits his teaching job. He was an English teacher. She was an English teacher. So Nick quits teaching English to pursue performing in a cabaret band.
Oh, fuck yeah. Get it.
Right?
That is so much cooler.
Do it for your
Yes,
dreams,
girl.
Nick.
Yes,
Go for
girl,
it.
get it.
Yeah, cabaret.
So to get this ball rolling, Nick needs to start writing some sketches, some dialogue, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So Howard in high school, where Ken also teaches, had some spare BBC microcomputers. So the computer that's going to be the centerpiece of the story is typically referred to as the BBC Micro. It's the name of the computer. So Ken brings one home he basically borrows one from the school, an extra. He brings one home to the cabin for Nick to write with, so Nick can start writing her sketches. So again, this is 1984. The internet is not really a thing yet. Like for those who know internet history, like at most it's going to be ARPANET amongst some universities and military in America or whatnot, right? So the internet as we know it does not yet exist. Home network computers are not a thing. So like your home, if you were alive during the 80s, or especially if you were the kid in the 80s, it was like to have like a home computer with no network. Like all you could really do is write on it, right? It was just strictly a word processor. And this was true of the BBC Micro. So this particular computer was designed to be simple and fun for preschool children, hence it being, at the local school. So what was interesting about the micro, and again, this goes back to pictures I'll be sharing on Instagram and that you guys can see in Discord. The BBC Micro was expandable, and what I mean by that was that some schools that had a BBC micro had the micro expanded to include a word processor that was named Edward, E-D Word, W-R-D, one word.
Okay.
And now when we think programs, we think you download it from the internet, install it to your computer, and you keep on going. This is old school. So per the picture that I share, Edward, the program, is on a chip. So when I say expandable, I mean you take the Edward chip and plug it into the BBC Micro, and now you have the word processor. That's how you install pirate programs back in the day with the BBC
That's
Micro.
crazy. Yeah.
Long time ago, kiddies. That's how we used to communicate on the computer.
Yeah, so you see the Edward is basically just a little microchip that can just about fit on your thumb, and you just plug it into the board of the BBC Micro, and off you go. Now you have a word processor.
Wait, though. So if you have to plug it, you said you have to plug it into the whatever. See, I can't even follow it. Processor. So you would have to know how to open up your tower to put that in there?
There's no
I don't know.
tower.
Well, think about there isn't even a tower. So I had when I was a kid, I didn't have a BBC Micro, but I had a similar type of word processor. So oh gosh, I'm trying to think of a visual. It's small enough to there's not even enough processing power to merit like a full motherboard that would merit the size of a tower, right? So this is basically almost like everything would fit within the monitor. Like the entire computer is just everything is built within the monitor because there's so little there to begin with. So imagine it basically being a monitor with a keyboard and everything is built in. But yes, I'm presuming, going by the picture of the Edward chip, that you would have to have some panel or something to open to access the board and plug it in. But probably wouldn't take too much knowledge. I'm probably a slot that you could just plug it in and go. I'm guessing.
Okay.
Like maybe
Like-
it's old school, probably came with a manual telling you how to do it.
Okay, because I was thinking like if you just knew if it were like external, like when you stick in like SD cards or something like that. Easy, right?
Right.
But if it takes more knowledge, like you have to take a panel off something and plug it into something, that's not going to be like just a layman's normal thing to be able to do.
So is
yeah,
that,
definitely a step above plugging in an SD card.
so I posted a picture in our Discord. Is that more kind of like what? Because that's how I remember them.
Yes.
It was just a monitor on top of a keyboard, and sometimes if you had floppy disks, you'd have like a little drive on the side that you could put your floppy disks in.
And this one did have the option to do floppy disks. But yeah, so no network. You're only expanding this thing by adding physical chips to it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So yes, and it required a floppy disk to store documents. So if you actually wanted to save the document that you wrote it on the BBC Micro, you needed the floppy disk.
Right.
So I also posted some screenshots to our Discord for you guys and for Instagram for everybody else and socials and whatnot. So screenshots of what the screen looks like. So the best comparison I can make is like old school DOS is basically what it looks like. Just basically a black screen. You're faced with the text prompt, and you have to. There's no mouse. Everything is you're typing in commands to navigate menus. And I swear this is important. But so for example, when you first booted up, you'd see your first screen, black screen, just some text on. You'd see like BBC Computer 32K, Model B, MMFS, Basic, and then a prompt, and then you type whatever program you want to launch. So like asterisk Edward to start the Edward word processor. And the next screen would be like Edward version 1.02. And then it would give you a list of menu items in text: create, revise, view, format, index. And then the next prompt, you would type the word of whichever one of those you wanted to do. So for example, to start up again from the beginning, you would type asterisk D or asterisk Edward, and then hit return. Oh, sorry. The full boot up would be *D, return, *, add word, return again. And from there, you'd be met with that menu, and you could create a new document, edit an existing document, view a document, or view an index of all the documents stored so far. All right. So again, like when I was a kid, I didn't have a BBC Micro. I'm not British, but like more in the 90s, I had a, non-networked, just straight word processor. And like I was in middle school. I remember like me and my friend, or our old friend Eric, we would just like write crazy scripts and stories where I would just like write a page, and like he would then get behind the keyboard and write the next part, and we go back and forth, and we do that as kids. Because again, you have no internet, so we just had to share a keyboard to go back and forth. This is the kind of old school, back in my day, kind of old school.
Back when we used to be kids, youngins.
But I think the important thing to note here is that like it wasn't as easy to like hack or falsify things as it is now.
Right. In order to hack this thing, you'd have to actually be a hacker, which like in the 1980s, you can't just like go on the internet and learn to be the hacksaw.
Like rare, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to, like, your profession would have to be that. So one, like, to be a hacker is a bit of effort, and two, to be a hacker that also has physical access to these people's house in middle of nowhere, Cheshire, countryside England, to then go in and to have the motivation, the knowledge, motivation, and sneakiness to get into the house and access this computer. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go.
A lot of things need to fall into place.
Yeah. There's some lining up of stars that would have to happen, among other things that will become apparent. Okay, so they set up this borrowed BBC Micro in the kitchen because it's the only room that has a table in the house. So they set it up on the kitchen table. So set it up on the kitchen table, fire it up, and then take off to go visit a friend, and forget to turn off the computer. And that's important because, again, like modern day, we're used to keeping, or at least I am, we're used to keeping our computers running 24/7. Not then. Like back then, like when you're done, you turn the computer off. There's no reason to keep it on. There's no network. There's nothing to update. You turn it off and you're done. So they forgot to turn it off, and they all left the house to go visit a friend. When they get back home, the screen no longer showed the Edward menu. So it was basically on another screen that was showing just another message. Nothing important. Just it wasn't on the screen they had left it at. This is the only detail you need to know here. So Ken assumed that at some point earlier, before they left, Nick must have accidentally hit the break key or something. Again, this ages it, back when keyboards had a break key. So he goes back into the Edward program, and he pulls up the index to store documents because, while he's sitting there, he was curious to see what Nick had been doing. He kind of wanted to take a peek and see what sketches she had been working on. So he finds a new file name title KDN. So of note, Nick tended to name files with single letters. So this was 3 letters, and then the only other content that would have been stored was a school colleagues from before he borrowed the computer, who had been storing like timetabling outlines on it. It was a borrowed floppy disk. So this matched neither of those type of files. So he thought it was kind of weird. Like, why is there a file titled KDN on here? So out of curiosity, he opens the file. And it reads,
Ken, Deb, Nick. True are the nightmares of the person that fears. Safe are the bodies of the silent world. Turn, pretty flower, turn towards the sun, for you shall grow and sow. But the flower reaches too high and withers in the burning light. Get out your bricks. Pussycat, pussycat, went to London to seek fame and fortune. Faith must not be lost, for this shall be your redeemer.
Wait, what?
That is the correct response.
What's
What
that
in-
mean?
What in the holy hell is happening?
So basically, there's a really weird poem on screen that doesn't read like one of Nick's sketches. So Ken says a shiver ran up his spine as he was reading this, and he reread the first two lines just to try to take it in, because like you just reacted, he's like, WTF. Meanwhile, not the exact same time he's reading it, but I mean during the same period of days.
Meanwhile, somewhere back in time.
No, meanwhile at the same location and time, this weird stuff is continuing to happen in this cottage. So around Christmas that year, they found a 4-pack of lager rearranged into a tower alongside a stack of cat food tins.
Because that's what I like to do with my lager and cat
Just
food.
stack it,
Just stack it.
Thank you, beer fairies.
right? Whatever's going on here, they really like their neatly stacked items.
Yes, I'm into it.
And this goes on for a few days. They keep coming down, just finding random stuff stacked in their kitchen. So basically, the stacking, they've only seen the one weird message on computer, and then the stacking events are just like every now and then they come downstairs and find weird stuff stacked. So it's not consistent. It's just, you never know. Some random day you're going to come downstairs and find some stuff stacked. Okay, February next year, Ken borrowed another computer, another BBC Micro, so that Nick could resume writing sketches. And at the same time, Ken and Deb wanted to play some computer games, again, 1985 era computer games, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And they also wanted to write up a music contract so they could try to publish some songs. Like all three of them are into entertainment / music kind of stuff. So again, they just absentmindedly leave the computer running in the kitchen and go out, hit the road for a bit, leave the house empty. They come back. Nick pulls up the index to check one of her files, and they find a new file named Reate, Reate, like create without the C.
Okay.
So the original text read in very old-timey English. So what I'm reading to you is going to be translated to modern English just so it makes more sense. And it reads, I write
on behalf of many. What strange words you speak. Although I must confess that I too have been badly educated. Sometimes it seems changes are somewhat obstructive. For many a time they disturb me in sleeping in my bed. You are a worthy man, who has a fanciful woman, and you live in my house. I have no wish to alarm you, for it is only since the half-witted fool ripped apart my confines have I been tormented at nights. I have seen many changes. Lastly, the charge house and your home. It is a fitting place, with lights which the devil makes, and costly things which only my friend Edmund Grey can afford, or the king himself. It was a great crime to have stolen my house. L.W.
Light switch?
No, what it said was, what was that? It is a fitting place with lights which the devil makes.
Which, okay. Okay, sorry. I was like, light switch. Okay, sorry.
Lights which the devil makes, and signed LW.
Mm.
So at this point, the three of them are now trying to look for some hint of connection between all this weird crap. The mysterious message on the screen, the stacking of random crap. They don't know what the heck's going on. So at this point, they're considering this is either hoax or a ghost, maybe?
Don't know.
So fast forward again to the next Saturday, February 9th. Ken's friend, and again, this is small time England, so we're going to have a lot of instances where they're just chatting with friends and sharing their story. So Ken's friend, a gentleman by the name of John Cummins, who was a solicitor in London, John Cummins recommends that they write a reply to this mysterious message. So again, imagine how silly this feels. No internet, no network. You just see a message on screen and you're literally just going to start typing a response. That's never be seen by anybody else.
That's pre AOL, like
yeah.
Not any of that.
But what the hell? Why not? We got nothing better to do. Also, I said it was written in a very old school English. So they take a guess that the language looked like it was about 17th century, and they were close. We're going to later learn that it was actually 16th century English, which, if you know your 16th century English, it's a lot different from our modern day English.
What?
Some Shakespearean speak, if you will.
That's Shakespearean. He's speaking Shakespeare, Mom.
Right? So, okay, so they're like, okay, what the hell, why not? So they compose a reply, and it reads as follows. In the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, dear LW, thank you for your message. We are sorry for disturbing you. What would you like us to do? Did you live in a house on this land in about 1620? Do you want us to tell you more about our time? Why write a poem? Who was Edward Grey? Is he related to the Egerton family? Do you have a family? Is the King James or Charles Stuart? What is the charge house? Was this village called Dodleston in your life? And how many families lived here? Thank you very much for your messages. Thank you for not making us afraid. Signed, Ken, Debbie, and John. So, all right. So they wrote them their reply, and then they go, as you do, they go run out to the local pub for a bit.
Okay, so
Well, that was
just right off the
exhausting.
bat.
Time to get a pint.
Yes.
Just right off the bat, though, they were respectful, so that's good. But they also fed a lot of information.
Yes.
So leading questions. Okay, just want to.
Now, to be fair,
Point
from
that
their
out.
point of view, they're asking questions based on what they read the first time. Given the kind of English that they got in the first message, they're making some guesses and replying in kind based on those guesses. So they come back from the pub after going for a pint, and sure enough, they find a response on the screen. 'Twas an honest farm
of oak
of
and
oak
stone.
and stone.
It is helpful that you should tell me about thy time. Dost thou have horse? Edmund Grey, brother of John Grey, lives in Kennerton Hall. The king, of course, is Henry VIII, who is 46. I know not of King James. My charge house is a place of schooling. L.W. 28th March, 1521.
So, some notes about this response. So, in both the previous message and this one, he referred to the charge house. So, as is clarified in the text here, the charge house is an old school name for school. So, by charge house, he meant school. He mentioned Kennerton Hall. So Kennerton Hall was actually built at the end of the 17th century. And he also mentioned Edmund Grey, but Ken notes that the records that they had of Kennerton Hall had no connection to anyone named Edmund Grey. So at this point, Ken suspects this whole thing is a hoax because there's some anachronisms. Again, like Kennerton Hall is built at the end of the 17th century, but the English is written like it's the 16th. So that doesn't seem consistent. Ken also picked up that the mention of Henry VIII didn't seem to make sense, because at the time that the response mentioned, again, it's dated March 28, 1521. During that year, Henry VIII would have been really young. Let's see. Yeah, so he was. So going back, the very first message mentioned. No, not the first message. The same message is dated 1521, but says Henry VIII is 46. But as history shows, Henry VIII was 30 in 1521, so he was considerably younger. So the age is off.
Okay.
And there's one other detail that's important here that I'm unable to share with you since I'm giving this to you via audio. If you were to read the text, there's a lot of weird, seemingly random brackets and question marks littered throughout the messages. So it's, again, why it's good to read a book. So you actually get to see the text with all the out of place punctuation, because that's part of the mystery is like, why is there this brackets and question marks?
You heard him, listeners. Go read a book.
So again, to go back to another disclaimer, a lot of these messages are really hard to read. Ken, in his book, attempts to give us translations into modern English. Most of the time, others, he doesn't even bother and just shows them in their original wording, which I had trouble reading. So some of them also are my own translations that I surely did myself. So just keep that in mind as I read stuff to you, that there's room for error.
I was thinking with like the questions and like, or the question marks and random punctuation, were they trying to insert emojis? And
Right.
1980s
The old emojis.
computer, yeah, 1980s computer couldn't
Can handle the
compute-
emojis.
doesn't know emojis yet.
Hold that
Maybe
thought
that,
for later.
yeah.
So we're going to need to revisit that. So anyway, I give that disclaimer to say that like the translations I'm giving you are going to be imprecise. Don't expect this to be perfect one-to-one, but we're doing the best I can here. And I say that because if you hear or read these passages in other channels that cover them, you'll hear them slightly different because everyone's going to have a little bit different take on how they translate it, and that's why. Okay. Anyway, so now we have, so it's being signed LW. Who is LW? That's going to be the first question that we're trying to figure out. All right.
I know, right? It's like, way to be cryptic, time traveler.
So a few days later, the previous message of February 9th is now February 16. Ken leaves another message on screen asking about LW's family. And he asked if LW went to the Chester market and just a lot of other miscellaneous questions to try to get a feel for who this guy is. So they leave the house again. They leave to go get their car serviced, go visit the mechanic. And when they return later in the day, they find 2 screens worth of text. And by 2 screens, I mean like scrolling. You gotta scroll to read it all.
Okay.
LW's reply reads as follows. My good
friend, I must needs say, how is it that there are many things of which I have no knowledge? It seems to me that if you cannot say why you're in my house, then I can no more help you than if my wits had gone. I have no kinfolk I can tell you about. My wife was taken with a pestilence, and the Lord did take her soul and her unborn son, 1517. My farm, it is humble, but it has a pretty parcel of land. It has a red stone footings and clean rushes on the beaten floor. This season I have much to do. I have to sow my barley early for my ale. It is this that is my craft, and which I am best at, I fancy. Also I have to go to Nutwich, to my known friend Richard Wishall, whose farm is so great as to allow him a 4-year rotation of fallow. I do so envy. He has much there, but nothing that delights me more than his cheese. It cannot be equaled by any other for pleasantness, taste, and wholesomeness of digestion. I shall also call in Nutwich Market. It is not so great as Chester Market by the cross, but it is of some interest. I shall need to go to Chester this season to get my shoes. My goodly friend Thomas Eldersay, a tailor by craft, makes them sometimes. I also make shoes, but none of my swine already. It is far too costly unless I need kill one. Do you know the country of Chester? The Watergate is a place that brings many traders. It is a shame the port does shrink. I can remember great ships now. They get smaller by each tide, but Chester Port is still greater than that of Liverpool. I'm often at the east wall of Chester, Cow Lane. It is not so tiresome there than by the cross. That is when my fowl or swine do not trip up my poor body. I hear tell you are a teacher at Hardwin. Do you mean Harrodin? Do you still earn the great sum of £20 per year? I remember my unpleasant dean, Henry Mann, who is likened to a fish. If any boy shall appear naturally averse to learning after fair trial, he shall be expelled elsewhere, lest like a drone he should devour the bee's honey. Nay, I cannot make merry on a holy day for fear of my life. My friend was once a-fluting on a holy day, and did have his ears pinned to the wood block. I think when you say Dodleston, do you mean Dodleston? My queen, of course, is Catherine Parr. Lucas.
Catherine Parr. Okay.
Yes. So we now have a first name. Lucas. LW is Lucas W. So what's interesting about this latest response is it actually corrects the problem with the anachronisms of the previous message. It corrects the time period. So his mention of Catherine Parr is important because this now places him during the time frame that Henry VIII married Catherine Parr, which was between 1543 and 1547.
And she happened to also be his final wife, as if you don't know, Henry VIII kind of went through wives.
Ah, yes.
Which is interesting too, because his first wife was Catherine.
Oh, and his last.
And his last wife was Catherine.
Isn't this the same Henry VIII? I am bad at history, but isn't this the same Henry for whom we have the Anglican Church?
Yes, because he wanted to divorce the first Catherine. The Pope said no. And so Henry VIII, more or less, as the great Robin Williams put it during one of his comedy acts, said, I am the fucking Pope now. And,
Yes.
And broke off and created the Anglican Church.
Yes.
So that he could divorce his first Catherine and marry Anne Boleyn.
Right. So I happen to be Episcopalian, and we're an American offshoot of the Anglican Church. And yes, we're well aware of that very problematic history. So, anyway, so this actually corrects the time frame. So instead of talking about 1521 as we originally thought, we're now looking at 1543 to 47, and now the Henry VIII reference makes sense. So that's an interesting kind of timeline correction. So he mentioned, if you picked up on, red stone footings.
I did.
So I shared a picture in Discord and again on our socials. Now it's a black and white picture in the book, but under and around their current house, that little cabin, while they're doing the renovations, they had dug up some red sandstone blocks. So that's curious. He's mentioned red sandstone. They found some. Now, again, when you're not hearing over audio, but you would see in the text, they're again puzzled by the punctuation. So this is important if you're a language nerd. Ken thought that despite the language, the verbiage being very 16th century, 1500s, the punctuation looked modern because there's a frequent use of full stops, commas, brackets, and question marks. That's modern English. That's not so much a thing you would have in older English, at least not to the frequency that is appearing in these messages. So that Ken takes note of that. That's curious. So side personal note, what I want to know, is it true that no one could, quote unquote, make merry on a holy day? Because going back to that message, he talks about he cannot make merry on a holy day because his friend once went a fluting on a holy day and had his ears pinned to a wood block.
I don't even know what that means. Like,
Well,
what does that mean?
Meant he was just running about playing his flute happily, I guess.
There
So
goes
you can't be
Jimmy.
happy?
He's just going to fluting.
So you can't be happy on a holy day? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if you maybe not be happy, but make merry. You can't go partying about. Can't go about dancing and playing your flute.
If I remember correctly, so basically what it was during the holy day or the Sabbath, you needed to be self-reflective. It wasn't so much about you not being happy, but you don't need to go about gallivanting and being free-spirited and being silly. That is the day that you devote yourself to the Holy Spirit, and you must be reflective, and you must, do penance. Sometimes you need to be reflective in prayer. You need to be quiet and humble during the Lord's Day. And if you're going about, as they say, making merry, that's more or less you're not taking the day seriously. If I recall correctly. What?
You need to put your flute up and be reflective.
No going a fluting, Jimmy. Damn it.
Now we're gonna have to pin your ears to the board.
I can't help it, Pa. I'm a musician. I've got
I'm a flutist.
I'm a flutist and I've got a flute. Can't stand the way of my dreams.
All right. So next enters another very important character. So Ken consults his friend and colleague, an English teacher by the name of Peter Trender. Peter thinks, so Peter knows his English, and he thinks, looking over Lucas's text, that he may have been speaking in a not just Old English, but in a specifically regional dialect. And again, it's part of what I find fascinating about the story, because there's also just so much language For if you're a language nerd, there's a lot to eat up here.
Mhm.
So Peter's an important character because throughout the story, he's the one who verifies the accuracy of Lucas's 16th century English. Now, not everyone's going to agree with Lucas. There are other people. I'm not Lucas with Peter. There are other people who will disagree with Peter, but Peter, being knowledgeable as he is, he at least thinks the 16th century English is valid, including the spelling, the grammar, the word combinations, and in parts where I haven't read you yet, but there are parts where Lucas uses some Latin interspersed with English.
Oh.
So Peter thinks that specifically within the Cheshire era of the mid 16th century, again, they're in the Cheshire region, that this language more or less lines up for the region and the time. By the way, Peter Trinder is still alive. You can go out the internet and find some people who've commented who are recent students of his. So he's a real dude.
Very cool.
Okay, so we hop forward to February 18th. Ken writes another message to leave for Lucas and asks some more questions. And basically in Ken's message, again, you can read all of Ken's messages in the book. But long story short, Ken is going to ask Lucas about how are you using a computer in the 16th century? That's kind of important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he also makes a point to slip in a reference to Bristol. And the reason he does is he's trying to verify the whole regional dialect thing. So he's trying to get a better feel for where exactly Lucas is. They have their suspicions, obviously, based on what they read so far. He's trying to pin it down better. And he also asks Lucas if he used a bridge at Eldford. Reason being, that would be another local identifier. There was a bridge there at the present day in the 1980s, but it was a private bridge. But chances were that earlier on, there could have been a bridge that was trafficked by everybody. So again, just a bunch of questions to try to narrow down and verify Lucas's location. And again, this is also testing if this is a hoax, just testing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So this time they purposefully leave the computer running, and then they go into another room in the house to play some music together. Because again, they're all musicians. They just all bust out and start playing together.
Did anybody bust out the flute? Did anybody go fluting?
As long as it's not a Sunday, they can flute all they want to.
For you, Jimmy, wherever you are.
And then later in the day, they left for another drive and then come back home to find a response on screen. My good friend,
can you tell me for what reason are you asking many questions which I cannot understand? I'm confused. The writing machine is a wonderful thing. Somewhat unnatural, I fancy. Unknown to myself, it may be, but I have seen you make lights on the box, and am cunning. Yes, I know of Bristol. My kinfolk did come from Bridgewater and Taunton, by the River Tone, until they died. To make merry, I like to be at the ale. Yes, sometimes I use the bridge at Alfred. Your merrymaking pleases me, but it is rather noisy at times. Will you tell your woman to play more of the flute thing? 'Tis a pleasant sound, I think. How do you travel to your school in Harrodon? I must hurry, as my dogs are loose and are being troublesome to my fowl. Lucas Wayman.
Okay. So he can hear them.
Yeah.
apparently.
I was about to say, like, so he can hear them. Like,
They're like the ghosts haunting his house.
the music is transcending time itself.
And he likes him some flute.
Got to get that fluting in.
So there's your answer, Chris. You were asking if there is some fluting, and the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Deb was a fluting, she was. So we now have a full name. Lucas Weinman is LW. So an interesting kind of side tidbit. Ken started noticing a pattern at this point. Ken would save his questions to a file named something like Luke 1, Luk 1 as the file name. And then Lucas would always save his responses as Ken, like Ken 1, Ken with a number, Ken 1.
Mm-hmm.
So they're both naming their files kind of the same method. Okay, so that aside. So now that he has a name, Ken takes off to the Chester City Library to try to validate the details that Lucas gave him. So what's interesting here is that the librarian told him someone else had also recently come by to research the history of Dodleston. So this is another Ken takes this as another sign that, okay, this is probably a hoax. Somebody's pulling the wool over our eyes here. So this has raised his suspicions further. But nonetheless, at this point, Ken and his buddies, they're researching all possibilities. Are we dealing with a hoax? Is this some sort of weird poltergeist? Does this something have to do with like ley lines in the area? Like what's the deal? What were the options on the table here? Meanwhile, they continue to experience a lot of bizarre stuff at the cabin. Not only have we had stacks of random stuff, there's now objects moving while they're present in the cabin. They're moving behind them out of sight, so it's like you turn around and something's moved. And they're continuing to just avoid downstairs entirely at night. They're still freaked out enough that when it's nighttime, they just stay in their bedrooms upstairs. So another weekend later, Ken borrows another computer, another BBC Micro, and leaves a new message to Lucas to try to fish out a response. And Lucas replies, My most noble friend.
Have I not been friendly towards you? And yet, unless I'm mistaken, I think there's not enough trust. Despite this, I have been open with you. I know not whence you came, nor whither you will go, nor do I have an answer for why you are in my house. But you are a goodly visitor, and you may stay as long as you like. My pleasant fool, my servant, thinks that you are all in my head. He says I act like a seer, but I know you live now. He also says that my blood is poison, and that it is my weak-hinged imagination. But I am not mad. I think, and told him so. I also said it is like fairy gold, that he should keep it secret until I write a book. I came to settle here because of the excellent pasture for which at one time I had to pay no tax, unlike my relations. Now things have changed, for the unfavorable king's sheriff does plague me. So it seems he is here every hour. I have had some mishaps with your hidden device, which does not place my words, but it is no more undone. I think it is too agreeable for me at times, but it does amuse. I fish for herrings and salmon in the Dee, and sometimes in Fluker's brook. Tell the friend John with whom you spoke that I know much about fishing. I think you're jesting when you talk about the horseless cart tiger. It's a good thing we can be carefree and joke like this, Lucas.
Oh, Lucas. I love how he keeps asking, like, I don't know why you're living in my house. Well, Lucas, if we're talking through time, it may be because you're long fucking dead. At some point, Lucas, some strangers are always going to be living in our house after we're long gone.
Do you really think Lucas in the 16th century is going to have a good idea of time travel? I mean, you got to give the guy a break. He's doing the best he can to wrap his mind around this stuff. He's very polite about it. He says you can stay as long as you want. You're good folks. I don't know why you're here, but you can stay.
Thanks. You could stay. I don't know what you're doing here for, but
I wonder how often hauntings are people from the future and not from the past.
Oh, do hold on to that thought. We're going to talk so much about that.
Oh, Christina, you have
considerably later, but that's going to come back around.
Yeah, and if you asked me that question, we could lose hours. Me talking to you about how I think a lot of hauntings are actually just their breaks in time.
I will tease you that an answer will be suggested later on.
Okay.
So Ken makes a note of kind of his inner thoughts at the time that I thought was interesting, because Ken writes his thoughts that either he was dead and we were alive, or he was alive and we were more than 400 years from the dates of our conceptions. So Ken's having trouble wrapping his mind around this too.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, which one of us are alive at this point? Like, where in time are we? What's happening? So, funny little term that you may have picked up on. Lucas described this fantastic communication as fairy gold. Just thought that was kind of nothing to pull from that. Just thought that was a really funny, like, what does that mean in the old timey thought?
I'm wondering if that has anything like fool's gold, like
right,
like or fairy tale, like it's fairy gold. It doesn't exist. It's pretend.
So another line of particular interest. Let me read that one again. I think you were jesting when you talk about the horseless cart tiger.
He's talking about cars, right?
Ken's car is a Jaguar.
So he can see it? Like,
I don't know. I'm not sure on that one. Again, this is where I wish Ken had, and again, like Ken wasn't rolling the money, but I wish Ken could have had an editor or somebody with, professional writing experience to catch that and kind of like, did Ken mention that in his letter to Lucas, or did Lucas actually see the car? Like what's going on there? I don't know. And the book does not clarify that. So some other but we will come back to that. So just hang tight. So some other details. Lucas mentioned Flukersbrook, if you caught that.
Flukersbrook.
What's interesting about Flukersbrook was because he was talking about the context of fishing, right? Flukersbrook was just a stream, and that stream was mostly underground, and it ran through Hoole, Hoole, and it's a shallow enough stream, and enough of it is underground that it was / is, I don't know if it still exists or not, but it was impossible to fish in. So that was kind of curious. In fact, back in the day, it carried the nickname the Bishop's Ditch.
Is Lucas a fairy?
That's a question. So just keep that in mind as we continue, because that's a good question. So meanwhile, Peter, who's our resident language expert, English teacher, Peter analyzed the language against the Oxford English Dictionary. So if you're not familiar with the Oxford English Dictionary, it's not just an English dictionary, it's an English dictionary of multiple eras of English. So that's where you'd go to kind of do some comparisons. So referencing that, Peter found that the wording to this point was consistently appropriate, albeit demonstrating some odd dialect. The dialect was weird, and the grammar seemed like it was the dialect of the grammar seemed like it was probably region specific. So it was kind of a weird, probably for that reason, he surmised. Anyway, Ken messages back the same day, and Ken writes some comments. He talks about his car, tries to explain that to someone who's never known the concept of a car, and Ken offers to talk more about fishing, since Lucas seems really interested in the topic. And he includes a photo of a Jaguar XJ coupe of the time. What I mean by that, again, we're talking old-timey computers. There's no scanner. So what I mean by include, he kind of just left a photo on the table, as I understand it. Just kind of testing what's possible here. Okay. So he basically snipped the photo of a Jaguar XJ from an ad, from like a newspaper ad or something, and left it on the table with the computer. Sure enough, Lucas replies later. My good friend,
I found your picture of the cart, but it is a crude thing, for without the horse it won't go far. Tell me what unknown wood this is. It's like silk. I cannot describe it better. I studied at Jesus College, Oxford. My best subject was Latin and Greek. I had to dress with a gown and a hat. John Colet was my most important schoolmaster. Some of my books were Epistolae Obscurium Barbarium by Martinus Rufus, Praise of Folly by my friend, of course, De Arte Morticia by Marco Girolamo, and A Goodly Garland and Colin Clout by John Scans, for which he was imprisoned by the unlikable Wolsey. He died at Westminster. The King's Sheriff is Tom Falhurst. He'll call on Tuesday. My favorite meal is Pompeii's with pastry and peas. I don't know how to prepare it, but my good woman Catherine will tell what to say. Boil pork until tender. Chop into fine pieces. Take cloves and mace and chop raisins of Corinth. Take it and roll it as round as you can and place on a dish. Mix almond milk and blend with flour of rice. Pour over the pomace and set off each with flour and cheese. I follow it with mead. It's good, don't you think? Lucas.
Okay, so poops. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. It's spelled Pumpes. I had to look that up because I really wanted to know what this was because it sounded delicious. Medieval meatballs is what it's casually known as.
Oh.
Okay.
So what's curious is that this time around, the house wasn't empty when the reply came through. So far, it was always when they left the house, they would come back to find a reply. Not this time. Ken had left for a bit, but Debbie was still upstairs. So she at least wasn't downstairs in the kitchen where the computer was, but she was upstairs taking a nap. So how about that photo of the Jaguar? Probably wondering about that, aren't you?
Yeah.
The
Strange
photo was now
wood.
charred at the edges, and it was so brittle that it crumbled in Ken's hands.
What the hell?
That's crazy.
Right? So right there with like flaming tire tracks in the driveway or something, right? Where's the DeLorean?
Great Scott.
But yeah, the photo's charred and brittle and just crumbles in his hands. Okay. Lucas gave us another tidbit. He mentioned that he went to Jesus College in Oxford. Jesus College is Elizabethan. It was founded in 1571. So that's curious because it would be too late for Lucas to have gone to. So that's another possible anachronism. So for anybody leaning toward hoax, there you go.
Wait, though, what if he's like communicating and time is passing differently, though, for him than it is for us?
That is certainly on the table. As we continue to explore the possibilities of time, I would not discount that. So he gave us a lot of name drops, and I'm sorry that I could not pronounce them to save my life, but all those name drops were traceable, save for one, that Mutianus Rufus that he mentioned. So about those, he mentioned his friend as the author of one of those books. That friend would be Erasmus, who is one of the most important pre-Reformation writers. Another curious name drop that he did was John Skettons, which was a little off because it should have been John Skelton, who was a writer of the time and of the book that he mentioned. Meanwhile, Peter, Ken's friend Peter, is again our language dude. Peter takes off to hit the library at Brasenose College nearby. And he talks to the librarian there, a lady by the name of Robin of Pedo. And she mentions something I want you guys to remember for later. And of course, I'll mention it when we come back to it. She theorizes, our librarian, based on the college records she has access to, that our boy Lucas may have actually been a gentleman by the name of Thomas Hawarden. Just remember that name for later. Robin, the librarian, she reviewed the list of books that Lucas cited in his last message and verified they were, in fact, contemporary with the 1520s to the 30s. The time frame matches the books. But unfortunately, the one that I mentioned earlier, she couldn't track down that one book by Mutianus Rufus. Again, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. But they later find out that it turned out to be that Rufus name was an obscure nickname from Mutianus Giacomo, who they could verify existed. So all these names checked out is what I'm saying in a roundabout way. So the names, they're contemporary.
Almost only in a way though that like you would have had to have known them personally though. Like that's not just common knowledge.
Right? As far as I know. And he does mention one of them as his friend, which was like a significant pre-Reformation writer, not a nobody. And indeed, like if you go doing some Googling, you're gonna find, the rich history on Erasmus there. So, but yeah, so we do have the one, the one reference that's the time doesn't line up, but everything else is lining up very well with Lucas's time period. Okay, so some time passes. And Ken comes back sometime later and starts to write down some more questions on the computer. So this time he writes his questions on the screen, and he goes outside and sits in his car. And Debbie stays inside, and she sits in the living room, which is basically adjacent to the kitchen. But no one's in the kitchen where the computer is. Not too much time passes. Debbie doesn't hear anything. So she goes and opens the kitchen door, and by golly, finds another message on the screen. So again, anyone who would have snuck in and done this would have had to done so quietly that Debbie didn't hear them coming to the kitchen from the next room.
Mm-hmm.
The message reads, My friend,
again I must say I have no wish to cause you discomfort. I am not easy myself when I have communication with you, but 'tis so that we both are friendly and have intelligence enough to recognize that fools or drunks we are not, and 'tis, if not for yours, my material for my book, I think. My cook says I shall repent of my adventure, and that it will come to a foul end. But I think she is jealous, and told her so. She does not like another woman in my home, and not one as fair as your maid, I fancy.
Oh my god. He's peeping.
This boy's hitting on him from hitting on her from centuries past.
Yep, he's peeping on her. Oh, she's taking baths. And
Girls,
shit.
girls got it. I feel like she'd just be like, yeah, I'm drawing all the men in, even from,
Ye
even
girls
from-
gone wild.
yeah.
Girls got it.
So the message continues.
The Red Book is strange. What material is it? And the key is strange also. Whose handwriting is it in the book, pray? You have many books, I fear they are too badly written. Tell me where the writing device came from, and how it makes the lights. I have so many questions. Tell me more about your world, Lucas.
Okay. Bet you're wondering what that red book is, aren't you?
Yes. What is it?
You could find out after this.
No.
Oh.
Thank you for listening to Little Podcast of Horrors. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. Got a true tale of the unexplained? Send us an email at littlepodcasthorrors@gmail.com or visit our website at littlepodcastofhorrors.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, join our Patreon. For $2 a month, you get access to our private Discord server where we chat, game, and you'll get access to episode extras. Don't want to commit to a monthly subscription? Make a one-time donation through Spotify or buy us a coffee. All donations keep the lights on for the show and help us fund future on-location visits to haunted places. Links are in the episode description. Want to learn witchy stuff? Take a course with Bearbridge Academy. You can also hire a witch or psychic at the Otso Salon. Be sure to use code LittlePodcast for 20% off Bearbridge courses and Otso services.
And now, back to the show.
So the red book, I bet you want to know what that is.
Yes.
I mean, if you want it, if you want to tell us, I don't
Wait,
care.
is it the Necronomicon?
No.
Okay.
No.
Boring.
In fact, so Ken had a red folder where he kept printouts of the messages. And Lucas mentioned a key. There was a key in the lock in the kitchen's corner cupboard. So there's a key in the cupboard and a red book that was the red folder where all the messages were kept. So again, it's like Lucas can see somehow.
Yeah.
That is okay.
So Ken replies to this message. Again, type it on screen. He notes that, as he's in his reply, he's being mindful that, okay, Peter was from Oxford, and he's trying to figure out how to explain in simple terms how modern technology works to Lucas. And he also writes in his message tries to explain how dangerous electricity is and how dangerous it is to handle. Like, how do you explain like everything from the Industrial Revolution to the 1980s technology to this guy in the 1500s? All right. So just remember that those are kind of the highlights that Ken included in his response. So fast forward to March 10. This is now the following month. Ken heard footsteps that began at the wall and moved across the ceiling above him. And then he found a new message. What's interesting about this latest message from Lucas is that this message shows that Lucas is now testing them. Lucas seems to suspect that they're hoaxing him.
Yes, Lucas.
So that message reads, My friend,
pray what strange demon are you? I am so confused. You are goodly, I feel, but your lies frighten me much. You said you were alive, but this is not so. I have no wish to accuse you, but you said also that you are an educated man, and that you know of my friend Erasmus, but you do not mention my misspelt words. If you were alive, you would say you know not of Jesus College. You also spoke of a power of which I have no knowledge. Where does this power come from? And what did you study in your place of learning? Where is it? Because if you do not explain this to me, then I must make an end to my words with you. This would cause me much despair. It is not I that make you afraid, It is you that makes me afraid. Lucas.
Okay, Lucas, let's play.
Really?
I'm just like, okay, you call me a liar?
Well, he's suspicious, like the future guy's suspicious. So wait, though, can you repeat the part about the Jesus College? Because you said the Jesus College thing wasn't until 1570 something.
Isn't that curious? Yes. So
Yeah.
if you were alive, you would say you know not of Jesus College. So this is Lucas showing he was testing them.
Yeah.
So the whole
And that was the
time.
anachronism.
Yeah.
But this is nothing but questions, because yes, it's also like the college wasn't until later in the 1500s. Yeah, I was what the heck?
I'm a little
Wait.
curious. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask, so was the college known as that before a certain time and then known as something else after?
I have
Like,
no idea.
no, okay, we don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of
Sorry,
course, him
Chris, go ahead.
No, and I was gonna say, and then of course him talking about the misspellings that they noticed.
Mhm.
I don't know why they didn't. Like, why didn't you just like? I would have been immediately like, okay, if you went to this college,
Hold that thought.
okay.
Yeah. So Ken replies to that message. He apologizes for missing the spelling errors. And after he replies and makes an apology, another reply from Lucas. My good friend,
will you dispel my doubts in the last message? I was somewhat confused. Your friend from Oxford does much writing in the Red Book. Pray, what does he say? It is unknown to me, but he uses some of my words. Does he come from my time? 'Tis true about my life. It was just a joke. My Latin is not so bad as that, and I know much about my most worthy Erasmus books. He was a most knowledgeable man for whom I had much love, and he spoke much wisdom on the frivolous and misgoverned ways of the Christian doctrine. I think he has opened many eyes to such so-called learned men when he was given his appointment in Greek. I began my time at Brasenose College, Oxford, not Jesus College. As I said, in all manner of things, Erasmus' best must be colloquia, than which I know no better. My cook Catherine asks, what is your most tasty meal, and how do you make it? My shoes are made of swineskin and sheepscoat. I have 8 pigs and 16 fowl. I tan the pigskin, cut the skin, then shape and sew it together, and put the sheep's coat and herbs into them to keep my feet healthy. I must go out. Time is moving on. Quiragias noscere de mias, adagia habere ye recitia, hec mias latanis is non ut utilis. Farewell, Lucas.
And before signing Lucas, he writes this entire line out in Latin that I dare not try to read to you because I will butcher the hell out of it. But just to say, right before his signature, he writes out an entire line in Latin. So this corrected the timing problem. He actually corrected the college issue. Curious, eh?
Well, okay, so was he saying, I see the words that are printed that are supposed to be from me, basically, and some of them I recognize, but some of them I don't?
That's what it seems to me to be saying, which maybe he's assuming. So Peter's writing, of course, Peter's involved throughout all of this. So of course Peter's there, but so Peter's is, I presume, writing in Ken's red notebook, which would make sense. Peter's helping out with all of this. So my wild guess, I may be completely incorrect, but maybe with Lucas's printouts, Peter's adding his own handwritten notes.
That's quite possible.
Or
Lucas,
I was
like,
thinking
I
some of the things that he was seeing printed, like they printed it off from the computer, right?
Yeah.
Like what he wrote. So I guess I interpreted that as he saw printed text that he recognized as his writing, but then there was other stuff that he didn't recognize. Not handwriting like Peter, but like printed text
that may
that he
also
didn't
be
recognize.
true. And so remember that note for later. And by later, like, this is going to be several episodes. So like the next couple episodes, just keep this in your brain for later. That will come back around potentially. But yeah, the college correction, that's really curious to me. So it's like he was going, just kidding about the Jesus College thing. I went to Brasenose.
That is weird. I guess I'm not putting a piece together because that's weird because the Jesus College thing was a real college, but not till later, right?
Right. So how would he
But
even
he's
know about
saying,
Jesus College to mention it even in jest?
yeah,
Unless maybe
that's
they were
what's
planning
weird to
to
me.
pull it at the time and he knew about it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
don't know.
curious
That's
if they
weird.
come back and be like, well, there is a college that was founded in 1571. So I should know about it because it existed, or at least from your perspective, it will exist.
Right.
See, I would have wanted clarification too on what he means,
Right?
Mhm.
because that's what I would have said. I would have been like in 1571, which technically, yeah, if he is even close to the time period he's in,
1520s.
well, if
That's yeah, a long time.
if he's talking about Catherine Parr,
Oh, right. I'm sorry. I was
then
going
it's
by
like
that. Yeah. So it's the 1530s,
30s,
right?
1530s,
30s,
1540s.
40s.
I have to look that up. Hold on.
Not the 20s. Yeah.
Yes, 1540s. You're right. 1543 is when Henry VIII married Catherine Parr.
So the 70s are potentially within his lifetime, but they still haven't happened yet.
Yeah.
So I mentioned he ends his reply with the Latin sentence.
Yeah, I was going to
So
ask, what did that translate to?
I don't know, but Peter showed the Latin phrase to one of the local teachers. Again, all these guys are teachers, right? So Peter shows it to the local Latin teacher, and that teacher derided it as "quote unquote" dog Latin. So apparently, the Latin is a bunch of crap.
Oh,
He's testing them again. They just need to come back and be like, nice try, Lucas. That's not real Latin. Try it again.
Right. So that never comes up again, which I wish it had, because like, what the heck, man? Like, I want to know more about, because remember he was bragging earlier about, like, he's done some school in Latin, he knows his Latin, but apparently he speaks it very badly.
See, yeah, they're not following up. They're not asking some of the questions I would have been asking.
Right. All right. So some time passes, and then another message appears on screen while they are all out of the house. That reads,
My friend. When I call Erasmus my good friend, I mean I have only met him 3 times at Cambridge. I know more about his most excellent books, but I'll describe his appearance. He was a handsome man. He easily became ill, for he was so small in height and weak in bulk, but he had so much strength in mind and soul that I had not seen before. He had black hair with some grey, and in his brow he has green eyes, strong in nose and chin. Upon his writing hand he had 2 gold rings and 4 on the other. Lean in cheek and bone, white in skin, and he did eat little, and once swore in my company. From what I remember, he had a difficult youth that made him more contemptuous towards Christian doctrine, and had no liking for monks at all. But he was so clever, and was not a man to argue with, nor to contradict, for he would win and exceed your wits. Dear me, he had good humour, and would often be merry and sing to himself when he was not so sick. He died in 1536 at Basel. Lucas.
So fast forward again to March 19. Lucas has grown confident enough that this time he writes to Debbie on screen and requests Peter instead of just talking to Ken. And that reads, My goodly woman.
You are well schooled, I think, for a woman, but rather a tomboy in some way. I do not wish to be offensive to yourself, for you are a most perfect partner that would satisfy any man. But you must know your place and serve my friend well. Next you will say you have a cart tiger, or can travel on some unnatural bird. Please ask your man if I can have words with the man you call Peter, for I may speak with him in my own language. It is difficult to read the words you write. Then we can have a more understanding of one another and our times.
Oh. So it's like he's trying to speak a second language in a way because
Right,
of the
because
Old
Ken-
English versus New English.
Right, because Ken, he may be trying his best, but Ken doesn't really know Old English. So like Lucas is really
Mhm.
struggling to read Ken's responses apparently. And so he's picked up that Peter knows the language. Like, just let me talk to Peter.
I also want to go back to the Latin. I want
Yeah.
to like question. So the professor says that's dog Latin and doesn't have much meaning, right? Like we can't translate it.
Yeah.
However, I'm wondering if back then they would have been like Latin is like kind of a dead language now, right? Like we don't like nobody speaks Latin. But I wonder if, language changes over time. So maybe people back then knew more Latin, right? And could do more with Latin. And now that it's like pretty much a dead language, we can't do a lot with Latin. So all we can do is like translate and know like written texts. And that's basically it. So there's like a formula. There's like a Latin that we can know, and that's about it. Like we can't
Right.
create much with Latin. So I
Right.
wonder if we're just so far removed from Latin that we can't understand someone that can actually use it and play with it and speak it.
Casually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't know. That is so far outside of my wheelhouse. I have no idea. So, Passion Sunday comes along. It's March 21. So Peter would pay Ken a visit, and they left Lucas another picture. I don't know of what. It just mentions that they left another picture to show him. And Ken's a little vague here, but he mentioned expressing some personal offense. Like Ken felt his ego was bruised by some of Lucas's claims. So my guessing, again, this is where Ken just really wasn't too detailed in his writing. I'm guessing from the context of that chapter that Ken's a little hurt because Lucas demanded to talk to Peter.
Oh, okay.
That's my guess. So anyway, so he wrote he just mentioned that to Lucas. So Lucas replies, "Forgive my hasty words.
It was thoughtless. I did not mean to cause you jealousy, but Peter, I think, would be a man I could readily understand and be a remedy for my sore eyes at night. But you are profiting from my words."
And the picture disappeared. So again, they leave him enough of a picture and it vanishes before his reply.
If I may,
Oh.
if I may interject for a moment. All right. So using Google Translate and Google Search, I don't know if you did that already, but that Latin quote more or less translates, if this is correct, what do you do to know about my, and then adagia.
Yeah. Adagia is a proper noun, apparently.
It's also the title of an annotated collection of Greek and Latin proverbs compiled during the Renaissance by Dutch humanist Desiderius. So it's a book. So what it seems to be saying is,
written?
what do you know about this book? To have you recite here my Latin is
I did not even think about fitting that into Google Translate.
To recite here my Latin is not so useful.
Oh, so he's admitting his Latin's not so good.
Yeah, and
okay, that's fascinating.
And the adagia was written.
Meos Latinus is non ut utils. Okay, my Latin's not so good.
And the adagia was originally published in 1500.
Oh,
I love it. Okay, good job, Chris.
Okay, so anyway, they had that just a little back and forth exchange, and this is, and then the item of note that they leave another picture and it vanishes. So March 24, Passion Sunday comes along, and I mentioned Passion Sunday because that's important, but it brings another message comes along, Passion Sunday.
You are doing well with my words. I shall communicate with you after church, or else I shall be fined more than I can afford. Lucas.
So apparently on Passion Sunday, he was just saying like, I'll talk to you later, but if I don't go to church, I'm going to be fined for non-attendance.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't even know that was a thing, getting fined for missing church. But okay, so the important thing was that message came through on Passion Sunday, meaning it was Sunday for both Ken and Lucas, because Ken gets the message on Passion Sunday, and Lucas's message was obviously sent on a Sunday.
Okay, so they're kind of synced up,
They're
or
kind of synced
can
up.
we tell that they're actually not based on what he's saying as far as like the context with which he's putting himself in
Yeah,
England?
I don't know. Apparently, it's just Sunday for both of them at the same time across time somehow.
It's like Outlander, except way less sex.
Which that's a sad story.
I love that show.
Yeah, it's good. Although the way Lucas is talking about Deb, maybe he wishes there was more sex. I don't know. It's
like baby girl.
Going sweet on Debbie.
You're a goodly woman.
I'm watching
as that pickup line.
I'm watching you from the 1500s, and your teeth are beautiful.
Back that goodly ass up.
Single listeners, try "you're a goodly woman" as your next pickup line and see where that takes you. So later that day on Passion Sunday, so I shared this image. I took it from the book and posted it in our Discord, and we shared it on our socials. So later that day on Passion Sunday, this is an interesting new development. They find chalk marks on the wall, and one of the marks was legible, a signature reading Lucas.
Okay.
He gave his Herbie Hancock.
Yes, his handwritten signature appears in chalk on the wall in modern day 1980s.
If only
So
we had a
Lucas-
way to compare that to an old
So
registry.
Lucas is interacting with their environment
To some degree, apparently.
to some degree. Apparently, they're also interacting with his environment because he can see
Yeah.
things, he can hear things, but they don't know.
Right.
Two
Okay.
timelines bleeding into each other in ways we cannot fully understand.
Right. So at this point, Ken and Debbie, they no longer suspect that a hoax is afoot. They're now pretty convinced this is legit.
Mhm.
And because that at this point, this stuff is now happening while they're in the cabin. Not they're just not in the kitchen, but they're in the cabins. It's like
Yeah.
someone's sneaking in. How are they doing it? How they're doing that while we're in the next room and fully awake and like expecting it.
And like all the time. Like not once, but like many times.
Yes, many times over. And Ken mentions in the book that he wrote in his diary around that time, if this is a hoax, we are now the only suspects.
Yeah.
So fast forward considerably now to April 10. It's been quiet for a while, but now in April, another message appears after this extended period of silence. And side note, again, Ken doesn't go into detail in the book, but he mentions that Lucas had previously mentioned that he needed some time to travel to Stopford. So he was going to be away for a while. So this is the first time they've heard from him since then in April. That message reads from Lucas. I saw my learned friend concerning your
time. He had many a word to say, although he thinks that I am sick. He advised me well. He said that I must not tell a soul about this unknown world and about your people, else it is nothing less than a capital offense according to the crown. I immediately swore that you are honest, but that it sometimes makes some people fearful, such as my servant. Also, he asks me not to write until he comes and sees the computer, so I shall speak with you 5 days from now. Your good friend, Lucas.
Computer.
Okay, it's funny. So this is I'm translating from Lucas speak to computer, but if you read in the book, like when he says computer in his language, he writes it commuter, COMMUTER. So it's like he doesn't quite understand the word and he's trying to say it. But he always says commuter.
Did Ken say something about a computer or anything like that in the past one?
I don't know.
I don't remember. Okay.
I don't recall because Ken does. I don't read all of Ken's messages word for word because this would go on forever if I did. So I don't recall if he ever said computer by word in his previous messages or not. So anywho, So yeah, Lucas has gone talked to a learned friend who's warning him, like, don't let the crown hear of you talking this crazy stuff or you're going to get killed.
Yeah.
So anyway, hop a few days forward to April 13. Ken and Debbie are they're just sitting in the cabin having a casual discussion about a history book that they are reading on Chester, their area around them. So the book that they're reading, it details a criminal case where a man was punished by what was called pressing, which meant being crushed under a plank weighed down by stones. Hell of a way to go.
God.
And the book mentions that the criminal was allowed to pass his land onto an heir instead of having it confiscated by the crown. And Ken noted that he had recalled the name of the cottage mentioned in this history book. Again, I'm probably going to butcher this. Pien Fort et Dieu. No idea if that's French or what, but it looks French. Okay, I mentioned them reading and talking about this history book because of the message that follows from Lucas on screen. Apparently, Lucas was listening from the kitchen because on screen on the computer is Lucas's response.
I heard you speak of the awful Pinier Forte et Dieu. Why is this? Do you mean to tell the crown?
Real quick, if I may interject, going back to commuter.
Yeah.
Or to commute. In the mid 15th century England, it meant to change something into something else.
Oh.
To transform. Also from the Latin word commutar, to often change or to change altogether. So that might explain why he thought it was commuter instead of computer, because that, he's seeing something, words being transformed, or he's seeing that, and that might be the best way for him, to
just express it.
Yeah, express it, and not fully understanding the term computer, but knowing commute or commuter. So,
well, I will tell you, without giving too much a spoiler of later episodes, I don't think he's typing at a computer.
No, but he still seems to know something about the computer. And I think he's grasping to some degree it transforms or changes things in a way he does not understand.
Yeah. So anyway, so somehow Lucas heard them talking in the next room, hears them talking about the history book, not knowing they're talking about a history book, and just hears the mention of this torture device. Is like, whoa, are you guys about to stitch on me to the crown? Is that what you're talking about?
That wouldn't do us much good, Lucas. Have you not picked up yet? We're in the future.
Right. So Ken leaves a response just to reassure Lucas, like, no, that's not what's going on. So later, Lucas replies, and apparently Lucas's friend that he was talking about, the friend from Stopford, has finally arrived to Lucas's home. So just to keep that in mind, and as we read Lucas's message. My good man,
I have heard of your griffins, lions, and wondrous possessions, and it is too fantastic to understand. And your people are unnatural, although I have no dread. You are a phantasm of great powers. It is my theory that you are in the future, so you can tell when the king ends his reign, and who is to take the crown. How do you cure the people of your time? Is the computer yours, pray? The fashion of our time is such that I will not give my own name, nor Lucas's true description and name. I beg you forgive me for this delay, for I was uncolted from Stockport in my hurry. A friend.
So that message wasn't from Lucas, it was from the friend from Stopford, apparently. He said uncolted, that last sentence. I was sorry for the delay. I was uncolted from Stockport in my hurry. Uncolted meant thrown from your horse.
Oh. No.
But you are a phantasm of great powers. My theory is that you're from the future. So you can tell when the king ends his reign and who is to take the crown. And then he asks about, people of your time. How you cure diseases now? It's interesting. So this is now the friend.
But he ends it with, and I will not tell you Lucas's.
I will not give my own name nor Lucas's true description and name. Lucas is not his real name.
I was about to say, so Lucas is, man, okay, at that point, we're going to the archives. I'm going to dig through the most dusty old papers I can find until I can find the name of the person who owns this house or owned this house at that time period. Because there might still be historical record of some degree since the house is that old.
I will tell you, you've already heard his name, and that will become clear in later episodes.
Okay.
But I kind of teased it earlier. So yeah, Lucas isn't his real name, Ken now realizes. So that line about the friend from Stopford, asking like, how do you cure diseases now? So Ken takes a moment in the book to kind of ponder the possibility of answering that question and warning Lucas of the future. So I just wanted to share this quote from Ken in the book because it amused me. Ken said, mischievously, I did not want to tell him of Elizabeth's ascension after Edward VI and Mary. He might confidently turn Catholic in 1554, only to be hauled up before the courts a mere 4 years later. I thought that the one really useful narrative we could give would be on how to rid England of the plague. I couldn't see much progress if all we could say to one man was, redesign your towns, burn your flea-infested clothes, and get the cats to work.
Yeah, get cats, lots of cats, kill the rats and the mice.
So I love that you just had this moment. It's like, well, I guess I could technically tell him of the future, but I don't think that's going to do anybody any good.
Well, and it's kind of interesting that they're having the foresight of being careful with future knowledge, because a lot of people would just recklessly say, oh, okay, well, it's Edward and then Elizabeth I, and then you're going to enter into the golden age. But of course, she's not going to like Catholicism at all.
Right.
At all. Get ready for that.
Be careful what questions you ask of the future.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're ready for those answers there, bub.
Your answer is get cats.
Get a lot of cats.
These bitty cats cram that house, buddy. Okay. So at this point, Ken reaches out to a local group called the Society for Psychical Research. Also known as
Yay.
They exist to this day, by the way. You can find their website out there.
They do.
So Ken reaches out to them for help. And he ends up in communication with their research liaison, which is a gentleman by the name of John Stiles. And John Stiles pays Ken a visit at the cabin. So John from the SPR, his goal is first, he wanted to rule out that there's a hoax, and he wanted to rule out a possibility of hoax from any possible suspects, including Ken and Debbie themselves. So that's kind of his initial agenda walking in. Okay. So the SPR performs a test on April 15th of 1985. So, and I'm going to give you a short version of this. The book's going to go into more detail, but basically, 7:45 p.m., Debbie has her mother and brother visit just to have some outsiders, not familiar situation, come in and be kind of objective observers. So Debbie brings her mother and brother in to the cabin. They leave the computers sitting on a table by the fridge in the kitchen, and they basically wrote a small greeting that they left displayed on screen. And the idea was to check for both new file names in addition to the existing and any possible additions to existing files on disk just throughout the day. Ken left a message asking for more details about St. Thomas More, just to kind of bring up a topic to expand upon. And then Ken leaves the house for the evening. So Debbie and her family stays back in the cabin. They make sure to secure all locks around the cabin so nobody else can get in, save for the skylights. They don't check the skylights. So they're expecting there aren't any ninjas coming in.
Sure.
So that was at 7:45 p.m. that they all started doing that. Then a few minutes later, at 8:03 p.m., they closed the kitchen door and they stay in the next room, the living room. The most that happened is that the mother reported at one point that she felt a drop in temperature and heard minor noises that sounded maybe like a mouse in the kitchen, and that was it.
Oh, okay.
9:00 p.m., an hour later, they go back into the kitchen and they find a poem followed by another message that reads,
Thomas More was not unlike Erasmus, for he was a man of wisdom and had benevolence for any creature. He showed much concern for the church and did not keep his thoughts to himself, and for that reason he was executed by the crown for being a traitor and not acknowledging the king is supreme over the church. He was an Oxford man who taught Greek and Latin and was close friends with Erasmus, and together they learnt with much haste many things which I cannot speak of. It would be best for your understanding that you read his Utopia or Erasmus's Praise of Folly, which More helped him write while living in More's house. When More died, Erasmus wept, for he knew no man as true. Lucas.
So yeah, so basically they conducted this test, tried to create an environment to ensure that nobody could sneak into the kitchen from outside. And sure enough, they left a topic to tease for a response from Lucas and got an answer with no one able to enter the kitchen.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
So I'm not going to talk a lot about the SPR. They're kind of a secondary figure in this story. And also, like I said at the beginning, I don't want to just tell you everything in the book. So if you want to know about the SPR's role in this story, read the book. I'm going to kind of skip over most of their stuff because my telling is going to focus on kind of Ken's direct experiences. But just know that the SPR is now present and kind of doing some tests on the side. So we're going to close our episode with a couple more messages to entice your interest in part 2. On April 19, Ken and Debbie check in by typing a greeting on screen. And they locked up the cabin and left for a while, since that seems to be the way to get a response.
Mm.
They get a response. The response reads,
You are a foolish scoundrel who has brought nothing less than evil upon the wretch. I hope he comes to no harm, for I guarantee your death by my own hand some way was not to be avoided with your charm of lights, and now he sits in the shameful dungeon. It will be your own ruin unless you help Lucas. He will die. If you reveal yourselves to the crown for what you are and display your devilish powers, then his life is saved. Reveal the truth and give no false threats, and explain what is necessary, computer. Friend.
Plot twist. Now they gotta save Lucas from the dungeons.
right?
God.
What the hell? So Ken's kind of freaked out. So he responds to that message by basically he asks for verification of Lucas's condition. He asks for Lucas's real name, mainly so he could try and look him up. And he asks for the location of the quote-unquote dungeon. So Ken offers in his reply to speak to the Crown, albeit Ken has no idea how he do such a thing.
Yeah.
Share his future knowledge of plagues. So basically, he does this by sending 2 responses and gets no reply for a while. And remember, this was April 19. A couple days later, on April 21, he finally gets a response from somebody going by the name of John. And John's response reads as, I have spoken with the sheriff,
who says you ask him to come at short notice, but he will come tomorrow. You have asked the name of Lucas Wainman. For a reason I do not understand, his name is unknown to me. I hastened to ask him this, but he said he could not tell unless it be to your ear alone. He said if this is what it is to help my friend, then I will hasten to press the matter to him. The sheriff told me that if you could show yourself for what you are, then you must give the mighty power to him, and he will request pardon for our friend Lucas, and he will beg the king himself to speak with you and your king. This is a thing that the sheriff himself has not had the pleasure of.
And Ken's like, I am the king.
Right?
Like, what?
of the future.
Yeah. Like, what?
Yeah, so hey, look, get your king to talk to my king, and maybe we'll let Lucas pass.
Have your people talk to my people. Send a pigeon. We'll fix this.
I'm King Ken. Okay.
I am King Kenneth
great-
of the future.
Of the
With
future.
Queen Deb. All right. King Ken, Queen Deb. You can talk
King
to us.
Ken the first
Yes.
of the future. So Ken replies and saves it to a file that he gave the name of help. And he explained in his reply that the only power that he had was to communicate via text. He can reply via text. That's it.
Like, we
And,
still don't
he
even
al-
know how you're getting the messages.
Right.
Right.
But Ken also asked where the computer on their end is located. The next day, John replies,
It
is
is
not
not
right.
right that you ask for my friend's name if you can give no reason for why you are asking. How can it help him? The sheriff does ask that you speak to him in person rather than through this computer, which he can't see. Otherwise, the computer must be taken to Lucas in Bolton Prison or Nanitch, if he is there now, to show that he spoke the truth. But it is not easy to move the device, and it seems to disappear when any have tried. Only when Lucas is here does it appear solid. I beg a quick reply so I may go to him.
Well, how's he using? Wait, what?
So basically, the friend, John, whoever this guy is saying they can't bring the computer to Lucas because they can't even really see it clearly except when Lucas is there. And when Lucas isn't present, it disappears.
But how is the friend
Yeah.
able to so clearly put messages and read messages then?
It's just Lucas testing them again.
No. So to give a little teaser to later, we are going to find out later. Like again, there isn't like these guys aren't typing at a keyboard. They don't know QWERTY. Okay,
Right.
but basically, kind of the impression that we're going to get is when they talk like verbally, it transcribes messages to the future. So
Okay.
like going to it and speaking, it will transcribe the message and send it to Ken.
So text to talk, like we do now on our iPhones.
Yeah, it's speech to text for all intents and
Speech to
purposes.
text. Couldn't say it right.
And so when he gets a message then from the future, is it speaking it back to him?
I don't know. Yeah, that's not that the details are pretty sparse about that.
I guess you could say this is kind of open to interpretation and speculation.
Yeah, and it's just, these guys in the past aren't really sure on how to explain what they are saying, much less clarify, right? So details are
You
kind of
also
sparse.
you also can have something really physical because then that could be found later in the future.
Right. So apparently this is something that could kind of phase in and out of being solid from the description.
I mean, if I was writing this as a story, I would say that maybe like at times almost like Ghosts, where it's like from their end, like the car advertisement would just sort of appear. Like it would fade in, and when he touched it, phasing back through the time, maybe it zaps out all the carbon and causes it to become brittle and like time sort of echoing into the past. I don't know. I mean, maybe in a sense that maybe that the text is just speaking, to them, like they're getting it in an audio way. But
It
the
does
thing
seem
is,
like
though,
it's visual because Lucas does talk about how hard it is to read.
yeah, and the thing is, if
I
it
think
was
it's
like
displayed somehow.
if it was like a voice just appearing, that would freak them more out.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
think it's a voice. I think text is displayed somehow.
yeah, like maybe like in a sense almost like it's printing it out for them,
Yeah.
in written form, maybe even,
Yeah.
and appearing as a letter. So like maybe in their sense, like in the present, it appears on their screen typed out, and in their time period, it just appears in letter form, in whatever
Interesting.
form
Remember
that they
that for later.
any form that the current time period is
Would
using
have.
would have. That's what it appears as.
Remember that for much later. We were going to come back to that.
Oh my gosh.
This
So-
is so fun.
Right? So Ken replies to that ominous message. So he writes a reply and basically explains the computer can't be moved. And he urges the second character to bring Lucas to the computer. And he assures this guy that Lucas is a good man and that Ken and company they're fellow humans. They're just in the future. They don't have any ill intent and they can't do anything other than talk via text. That's the extent of their power. So he's trying to get some reassurance. So the next day, a reply comes through on screen. My good friend.
I know not where I can start to describe my misfortunes. but it is so good that I can have your true words once more, which I did not think to hear again. I have thought much of what you said, and about the box of lights, for it is this very matter I fear for my life. The sheriff has forbidden me to leave my house, and I am guarded by the sheriff's men, who are at each door, but he agreed that I should be left to myself. There is nothing you can do, because I have communicated with your time, and here are the consequences. I think we are a history book that has its front and back pages joined together. We are each other's side of it. We are in God's book. I can see what it is to come and what has been. You can see only what has been. When your box came, there was a verse on it that said, I was not to ask about your unnatural knowledge, for the box of lights will be no more. It was in my language. My fellow Peter could not have done the writing so true as this was. I think you do not know about this. I have told the sheriff that though I have seen you and your sweet maid many times, one cannot speak with them, nor can I either, and never had. But I said you are of strange description and appearance that would frighten any man to see you. I told him it is not too wise. Nonetheless, I am still to satisfy his demands before the seventh day. I know not who betrayed me and accused me, but I know you are my true friends, for whom I have much love. You would not do this to me and betray the trust we have. I think you know what my fortune is, but I know not what you can do, my goodly friend. There must be some way of your time that can help me from my fate, for I see only the iniquity and cold temper of the law around my neck. You are now my true friends, who are my only hope. Yes, I am old, but I have so many questions to ask for my book, which is all I want before I go to my God. Pray you destroy my writings, for fear the sheriff may ask what I have said to you. Your helpless friend, Lucas.
Okay. I revise. I think he is seeing their time period, and he's seeing their computer. So it is either a form, if we're going to just jump off here and say this is real, this is really happening, I think that he is either speaking and the computer, and he's watching their computer type it out, or he's writing it out, and then as he sends it forward, it appears, somehow it's faxed to the computer screen. I'm leaning towards the first, that he is seeing, because he's seeing them.
He's looking over the shoulder.
Yeah, he's looking into their time period. Something is allowing him, something that's not allowing them to look at his time period, that he's being able to see into their time period.
And there is a device in Lucas's time period.
Yeah, and he's talking about some
box
device,
of lights.
a box of lights, which that's what makes me wonder if he's either just describing their computer, or it's this box of lights.
And it's a police telephone box, and
oh god. And that somehow maybe the box of lights it's a receiver like our phones are, and he is speaking into it,
yeah,
and then seeing the words transcribing onto their screen like we do on our iPhones, which is normal now. It would be like us basically placing our iPhone in his time period and hitting speech to text and then letting him talk, and then it just appears on their screen. So damn. Okay.
It reminds me of like, so was it Einstein that was like time travel may be possible, but you can only go forward? So like for Lucas, that's moving forward, or like he can see forward, but they can't see backward to him. So the only way they can communicate with him is electronically, but he can like see them. He can see that they're like interacting with his environment. Like he can see forward, but they can't
see backward.
But somehow things are still, because their messages are still going backwards though. Their data.
Yeah, but it's still, there's something like electronic happening. So that's the only way that they can communicate is through like this electric, but like physically, he's the only one that can see forward.
I'm glad you asked that question, because we're going to close this episode with this. On April 27th, Lucas, who they don't think seems well at this point, given his messages, Lucas he sends various messages throughout the day. But there's one message that really stood out to Ken, and it reads as such. My fellow Peter,
alas, what can be done? I cannot even take your hand before sentence of death. I must have your words before I bid farewell to good Peter. Long live our Oxford. Lucas. You said your time is 1985. I thought you were also from 2109, like your friend who brought the box of lights, pray.
Oh, shit.
Stay tuned till next episode, part 2.